One announcement. That's all it took to send whispers racing through palace corridors, Hollywood backlots, and private group chats where reputations live or die before sunrise. Tom Bower has a new book coming, and if the early murmurs are even half true, it's not just another royal tell-all. It's a detonation aimed straight at the carefully polished image of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry.
I think just alone, the fact that she said, of course, she hadn't got married in front of us all at Windsor, but 3 days earlier.
A gesture to suggest it here. The only person that Meghan, I think at the moment, is crying for is for herself.
Survival mode.
Yeah.
I mean, she knew by then it was a flop in terms of popularity.
The man they once dismissed as a noisy critic is now being treated like a ticking clock. Because last time, he wrote predictions people laughed at and then watched unfold in slow, humiliating real time. Deals cooled. Invitations dried up. Public sympathy thinned out like mist under stadium lights. And now he's back, not to speculate, but to connect dots he's been collecting for years. Behind closed doors, the anxiety isn't about gossip. It's about receipts. Bower's reputation isn't built on vibes. It's built on documents, former insiders, timelines that line up a little too neatly. And according to publishing chatter, this new manuscript digs into the years before fairy tale headlines. The era where reputations are formed, alliances are made, and habits get locked in long before the world starts watching. The entertainment world has a short memory, but a sharp instinct for risk. The moment a project smells like controversy without profit, doors quietly close. Studio executives don't need scandals, they need stability. And the Sussex brand, once marketed as modern royalty meets Hollywood reinvention, has felt increasingly like a lightning rod without the sparkle. Remember when satire turned into cultural shorthand overnight? When South Park aired that brutal worldwide privacy tour episode, it wasn't just comedy, it was a branding shift. Satire has a way of freezing public perception in one exaggerated frame. After that, every public appearance, every interview, every private moment played out under a cloud of punchlines that wouldn't fade. Hollywood laughs and then quietly recalculates. Streaming was supposed to be the power move. Big platforms, big budgets, global reach. But in the ruthless math of entertainment, attention is currency, and curiosity doesn't always convert to loyalty. When shows don't spark conversation beyond launch week, executives notice. When follow-ups land softer than debuts, renewal meetings get shorter. And when a brand built on personal narrative stops delivering fresh chapters, the audience drifts. Publishing insiders say Bower's new work doesn't just revisit the media years, it rewinds to the networking years. The social circle years. The period where proximity to power matters more than fame itself. That's where names like Soho House start surfacing in quiet industry talk again. Not as scandal, but as context, the kind biographers love because it explains how doors opened before the world knew to ask who held the key. One figure repeatedly orbiting those conversations is Marcus Anderson, a hospitality insider whose career rose alongside elite membership circles. To most people, that's background detail. To an investigative writer, it's connective tissue, mapping who met whom, where, and during which life chapter. Not accusation, just architecture of access. Meanwhile, back in California, the reinvention machine keeps trying to reboot. Lifestyle branding, media production, philanthropy. Each venture launched with glossy optimism, each followed by quieter than expected impact. In business, silence is louder than criticism. When consumers are excited, you hear them. When they're not, you hear numbers. Foundations are especially sensitive territory because they carry moral weight. The Archewell Foundation was introduced with language about compassion and global impact. But nonprofits live and die on transparency. Donors read filings. Analysts track ratios. And when spending, staffing, and fundraising patterns raise eyebrows, investigators start asking questions, not about intentions, but about sustainability and structure. That's where Bower reportedly focuses his lens. Patterns. Not single events, but repeated cycles. Big launch, big headlines, cooling momentum, staff turnover, strategic pivot, relaunch. Over and over across industries, media, commerce, charity. To critics, that's mismanagement. To supporters, it's growing pains. To a biographer, it's narrative. Former employees, once silent, are said to be less cautious now. Time changes loyalties. Distance softens fear. And when people feel their side of the story was never told, they start answering calls from authors known for listening. No dramatic accusations required, just descriptions of work culture, expectations, pressure, and the emotional climate behind glossy public campaigns. Public perception, once cracked, rarely resets. Poll numbers in the UK and the US have fluctuated sharply over the years, reflecting a left-to-fatigue arc that's become familiar in the age of overexposure. Sympathy surges during vulnerability. Skepticism rises during saturation. Celebrity today isn't about fame, it's about balance. Too visible and mystique evaporates. Too defensive and narrative control slips. What makes this upcoming book feel different isn't that it's critical, it's that the timing lands when momentum already feels fragile. When careers are ascending, expos look like attacks. When careers are wobbling, the same expos look like explanations. And explanations are dangerous because they stick. Hollywood can forgive almost anything except unpredictability without payoff. Studios forgive difficult stars if they're box office gold. Networks forgive controversy if ratings explode. But when controversy outpaces output, tolerance evaporates. The Sussex story began as escape and empowerment. Then it became revelation and retaliation. Now it risks becoming revision, with someone else holding the pen. Bauer isn't promising fireworks. He's promising footnotes, dates, memos, interviews. The slow, methodical kind of storytelling that doesn't trend for a day, it settles in for years. And once a narrative gets printed in hardcover with sources attached, it moves from gossip to reference point. That's the shift causing nerves. Because image can be managed, headlines can be spun, interviews can be staged. But a documented timeline? That just sits there, waiting for journalists, producers, and executives to flip through before deciding whether to pick up the phone. And right now, the biggest fear in certain circles isn't scandal, it's confirmation. The thing about reputations is they don't usually collapse in one loud crash. They erode in whispers first. Quiet exclusions, calls that don't get returned, meetings that get rescheduled until they simply stop existing. And that's the atmosphere swirling right now. Not loud scandal, but cold distance. Because when an investigative author circles back for a sequel, people in power don't just worry about what's new, they worry about what's finally provable. Insiders in publishing circles say this manuscript leans heavily on timelines. Who knew whom, who introduced whom, and which opportunities appeared right after certain relationships formed. Not accusations, just sequences. But sequences can be more devastating than claims because they let readers draw their own conclusions. And Hollywood executives? They read between lines for a living. There's also renewed focus on the Great Reinvention era, the moment royal life was traded for creative freedom, global influence, and billion-dollar potential. On paper, it was the perfect modern fairy tale, independence, media control, purpose-driven branding. But in execution, the road has looked bumpier. One former media consultant, speaking anonymously in industry chatter, described the strategy as launch fast, pivot faster, big splash announcements, expensive visuals, grand mission statements, then sudden shifts when traction didn't match expectations. In startups, that's called agility. In personal branding, it can start to look like instability, and instability makes investors nervous. There's talk that Bauer's book dissects not just public failures, but private expectations, the pressure behind the scenes to turn personal narrative into commercial empire. When your life story becomes the product, every chapter has to top the last. Trauma revelations lead to inspirational messaging. Inspirational messaging has to lead to measurable impact. And when impact is hard to quantify, scrutiny creeps in. The streaming era was supposed to be the turning point. Total creative control, global reach, prestige platforms. But entertainment today runs on ruthless data. Completion rates, rewatch value. Social conversation spikes. If a show trends for a weekend but disappears by Monday, executives call that curiosity, not loyalty. And loyalty is what keeps contracts alive. There's also growing industry fatigue around exposure saturation. Once every interview felt like a revelation, then every interview began circling the same emotional beats. Audiences don't just consume stories, they track evolution. When the narrative feels stuck on repeat, empathy slowly morphs into impatience. That's not cruelty. That's modern media psychology. Meanwhile, the philanthropic arm, once positioned as the moral anchor of the brand, has faced increasing analytical attention. Charity watchdog communities are small, but relentless. They read annual filings line by line, comparing overhead ratios, administrative costs, and grant distribution patterns. Online forums dedicated to nonprofit transparency have reportedly been dissecting every available document, not emotionally, but mathematically. And math doesn't care about celebrity. Former staff stories, if they appear as rumored, won't necessarily be explosive on their own. Workplace tension is common in high-pressure environments, but patterns are powerful. Multiple departures across different phases of the operation can paint a picture of internal turbulence, the kind that makes future hires hesitate and current partners reassess. It's not about villains, it's about viability. Then there's the social circle mythology, the years before the palace gates, when introductions mattered more than headlines. High-level networking has always been part of entertainment culture. Private clubs, discreet dinners, guest lists that double as power maps. None of that is scandalous by default. But when revisited through an investigative lens, it becomes context, the origin story behind later influence. And origin stories shape legacy. Public opinion, too, has shifted in a way that feels less emotional and more settled. Early reactions swung wildly between adoration and outrage. Now the mood is different, less intense, more resigned. Like the audience has filed the story away into a mental category labeled complicated, still unfolding. That's a dangerous place for a brand built on emotional connection, because neutrality doesn't drive engagement. Silence does not sell. Industry observers say the real tension isn't about explosive revelations, it's about narrative cement. Once a detailed, source-heavy account hits shelves, it becomes reference material. Journalists cite it, documentaries borrow from it, producers use it as background when considering future projects. It doesn't trend for a week, it lingers for a decade. That's the long game Bauer is known for. And timing is everything. A critical book released during peak popularity feels like an attack. The same book released during a career plateau feels like explanation. Right now, the momentum behind the Sussex brand feels uncertain, not gone, not thriving, hovering. And hovering is when outside narratives gain the most power, because there's less positive noise to drown them out. None of this guarantees downfall. Public figures have staged comebacks from far worse. Reinvention is always possible when strategy meets humility and timing meets audience appetite. But comebacks require narrative reset, and resets are harder when someone else is publishing the backstory at the same time. The entertainment world loves redemption arcs. What it struggles with is repetition without growth. If this book lands the way insiders hint, it won't shout. It will document. It will line up interviews, financial patterns, professional cycles, and social timelines like puzzle pieces that readers assemble themselves. And once assembled, that picture, fair or not, becomes part of cultural memory. That's why nerves are high. Not because of gossip, because of permanence. And in a world where image is everything, permanence is the one thing you can't PR spin away. PR spin away. PR spin away. PR spin